Okay, so we are going to talk of two technologies for agricultural research. One is on remote sensing, another is geographical information system. And I suppose I have nearly an hour or so, up to 6:50 or 6 o'clock the time.
Till approximately no, not 6 o'clock. Nitishri, I think we are till 6:45.
6:45, ma'am.
6:45.
Okay, okay. Thank you. Just to tell something on history related to what remote sensing at IRI we have been doing, because many of our colleagues within ISRO, within ICR also don't appreciate and know that this is one technology where IRI has been lead. And we have been part of the first remote sensing experiment which happened in this country. That was way back in 1969. And it is a famous experiment called coconut wilt disease. It happened with a collaboration with our own space agency ISRO and again NASA of US. NASA actually gave the multispectral camera and ISRO coordinated the flight and the plane. And of course, the whole experiment was designed by the Division of Agricultural Physics. And this is the first experiment way back in 1969 when the remote sensing technologies work was started in IRI. And remember that whole remote sensing technology now is applicable for atmosphere, for coastal, for glaciers, all kind of hydrosphere, cryosphere, biosphere, but everything started with in this country with the applications for agriculture. Like many other things have started in India, many technological initiatives for farmers or agriculture. Similarly, the remote sensing also started with this whole applications for agricultural domain. And later on, this has developed into the whole India space program. And the basis was also to able to help out our farmers and farming communities. Then we were involved at IRI, our division, Water Technology Center, to undertake joint experiment programs in 1980s, where ground-based experiments on different kind of sensors, how different crops, soil type, they give the response in different wavelengths. So those understandings were there so that ISRO could design their own cameras, which were put in our IRS series of satellite way back in 1988. IRS-1A was launched. At IRI, we were also first to introduce something like around 1984 to teach this discipline at postgraduate level. At that time, none of the engineering colleges even thought of, not they were aware of, but an agricultural institute, being a repute of IRI, we started teaching them. And including 2004, we teach a course, which is one of the unique course, very appreciated course called Satellite Agrometeorology. Many of our students use either fully or partly their research using these technologies for problem solving. And of course, we have state-of-the-art laboratories, equipments, and including we own our own satellite ground station at Delhi. So this is just to remember that this is the photographs from that first experiment which happened in 1969. Our founding head, Dr. Dakshinamurthy, he took this camera. It was a very interesting study because he himself was from Kerala, and you know, coconut is a tall tree, a plantation, and if it has a wilt disease on its crown, from below you cannot look at. So they wanted to know that if from remote sensing, can we look at the crown and identify which are the trees which are impacted by the wilt disease? And it was because the response in infrared region of a wilted plant is different from that of a normal plant. So with that experiment, the whole technology started in this country. So these are some photographs and analysis during that time. And they also wanted to see that whether we can distinguish between a dwarf variety versus a taller variety of coconut plant, and diseased versus non-diseased. At the same time, one more experiment was done by Dr. Nagarajan. It was published in 1973. He took up a weather satellite data to find out how the wheat stem rust spreads in central part of India. So he used a ESSA-9 weather satellite data and drawn a trajectory of spore clouds, that how with clouds and winds, the spores of this particular stem rust could be traveling to the region and from where it is coming. So they sourced and tried using these images from the satellite, they trajectory and found that Nilgiri Hills were the source of inoculum. So this was also simultaneously, like this experiment was a benchmark. Another similar experiment, IRI was happened. And this is the source tracking, the last one. This is the source tracking of the spores, that how they move using different times images, satellite images, to see what is the wind pattern. So these are some of the, I say, benchmark studies which ushered into this technology, and it was not thought of at that time that where we would be moving. So this is just to give an example that we also host a satellite ground station at IRI. This is our location at Delhi, and the satellites, when they enter into this circle, from many of the satellite, we receive the data directly, and from the satellite, as satellite come from either south and go to north, or come from north or go to south. So while they are in the sky, our antenna track the satellite, communicate with it and download the data. Then we have processing servers which generate the data products for different applications. So why this particular technology of remote sensing and GIS? You all know that there is a famous saying that you can't manage what you don't measure. Of course, in economics, a lot of time you work with scale data or qualitative data and then scale it. But then also it involves doing some kind of quantification, some kind of measurements. So any type of management decision should be based on measurements. Otherwise, they would all be in thin air. And for measuring, it means you need observations, you need data, data need to be collated, converted to knowledge, and that knowledge provides you it provides you the platform so that you can take an informed, or the knowledge provides you the wisdom to take the informed action. So this is the basic gamut, that why we should be using these kind of newer technologies now, and more so in the domain of agriculture, because our challenges are increasing day by day. It is not only we have to increase the crop production, we have to increase the quality of crops, we have to take care of the risk related from extreme weather events. Then there is a looming danger of climate change. Besides that, there are other invasions, whether it is of pest, diseases. Like last year, we had seen a lot of incursions of pests of locust coming from as far as Africa and Saudi Peninsula, going up to something like Bihar and Jharkhand. So you need observations, data, and that too, which is data which is repeated, which is objective. It should not be subjective, it is objective, and on which any standard analysis should be able to produce reproducible results. Now, the beauty is that this particular geospatial Earth observation data has nearly become freely available. So now what you need is you should able the capability or skills to use this data to your end to which you are interested. Because those times have gone long time back, when we were only thinking how to acquire the data, and just seeing the data would have been more than sufficient. Seeing the image of an area and how it has changed over some time, and that too at a very coarse resolution. Like I started my career in 1991 with ISRO, and that time we used to work with a satellite data with a best resolution of 72 meters. And nowadays we talk of something like commercially available 1 meter, and even up to 50 centimeter is available. So you can think of. So whether it is from our own space agency's portal, which is called Bhuvan, You can download a lot of data. It is from all of the NASA satellite data, mostly is available right from as far as from 70s to current, from a range of satellites. Then another important thing is the European Union has put in also 5 satellite data from working in different range with different technologies, and all that data is free. And if you are not satisfied with the only free data, then you have a Google Earth engine also. I hope many of you might have heard it. But if those who have not heard it, Google Earth Engine is basically a platform which has all these free satellite data access. It provides you all the computation facilities also. So even if you don't have a high-end computer to compute, it has a lower memory hard disk, you need not to worry. What is needed is that you need to have a internet connection so that you can log in into Google Earth Engine, and it comes with free with your Gmail. So all the satellite data is available there. You have to do a bit of programming in JavaScript to access the data, process your data, and generate the result. And finally, those results you can download onto your Google Drive and finally take it out. So now there is no need to have purchase the data. You need not to buy a processing system, and you need not to actually rely a lot on people like us who are what we call as analysts or specialists who deal with this data. Because much of the training on any of this data, you want Google Earth Engine and everything, that is available on YouTube. You can take those free lessons and work with that data. So this is the beauty of how this technology has taken and come to the next level. Besides that, like remote sensing, we have freely, if you want to do analysis in your own workstation and computer, we have now free open source GIS softwares available, because commercial image processing, which process the remote sensing data, or the commercial geographic information system softwares are costing a lot. Their licensing cost is very high. And of course, they need to be renewed every 2 years, 3 years, and those kind of things. So now you have freely available softwares like QGIS, which is one of the very standard GIS, free open source software, and it provides most of the functionalities which any commercial GIS software could provide. And besides that, there are other flavors like Saga. Then we have ILWIS from Netherlands, which is an open source GIS and remote sensing data system. And if you are more than that, you can actually host your own web-based geoservers. Using open source geoservers are available. It means you can serve your maps outputs onto a server onto a website through this particular services, whether it is OpenLayer, RStudio, Scilab, which are again processing. You can actually process data using these softwares. They handle a lot of remote sensing data as well as geospatial data, which is part of GIS. So RStudio, I hope many of the socioeconomic scientists use it to do the analysis. And like there is a MATLAB by engineers, there is a corresponding open source Scilab also. So I would request my young colleagues that this is the time that please do have some kind of skill development in this area also, because it will help you in your research, problem solving, and add value to whatever publications, whatever policy planning you make out. It would be on a more sounding, based on observations, objective data analysis. So shall we proceed?
Yes, sir.
Are you finding it interesting?
Yes, sir. Really interesting.
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Because I don't want that for nearly 1.5 hours, I'll do a monologue. I don't have any response as such. This whole online system, though having advantage that you can connect a lot of people at odd times, but a bigger thing is I cannot look at your face and I don't know whether I'm making something interesting. What I am tackling is causing some interest to you or not. So this is the drawback, because my generally teaching style is that I keep looking at the faces. So I know that whatever I am teaching, whether something is going into is getting imbibed by the listeners or not, or it is of no interest. So I can change track to make it more interesting. So anyway, this system is like that. We have to work with that. Now coming to this EO data, EO means Earth Observation Satellite data. Another advantage of this data is that depending on your scale of problem which you want to handle, corresponding scale of satellite data is available. I hope most of you are using Google Earth. So Google Earth has a very high resolution data set of the order of 1 meter. Only problem is that it is not providing you the real-time data. So if you want to have real-time data, you need to purchase it. Of the same resolution, which is of the order of 1 meter, it costs a lot, because currently some commercial private agencies are providing that kind of data. Our own space agency, ISRO, has on one satellite, they have 3 kind of satellite, from 50 meters every 5 days to a 23 meter every 15 days to a 5 meter resolution every 15 days again. So whether you want to do a village scale application, at a plot scale application, to a district scale application, to a country scale application, corresponding amount of data is available. The other advantage is the more you go coarser, more repetitive, better repetitivity you will get in observations of this data. So this is just to give an example that how a 4 meter data from satellite looking at the agricultural landscape looks like. So what you would be wondering, that we are seeing red color. Actually, these red colors are all having crop which is green in color. Okay. But in satellite, a green crop looks red. So more red is there, it means more green is the crop. It means more healthier. And the reason being that the satellites, I don't know if all of you know that the colors which we provide to the different wavelengths is a property of your eye. The radiation which is entering into your eye, it is having different wavelengths, and how these wavelengths are perceived by your brain, it is in terms of your color. But satellites not only look into the visible range where your eye looks, it even looks beyond the wavelengths. And there, like near infrared region, the plant has a very high reflectance as compared to what we see with our eye. So any of you, if you scale out a tall building in your neighborhood and go and look around, if it is not the water or sea around, then you will see the most dominant color is green because of the presence of vegetation. And that color green is because that vegetation only reflects 10 to 15% of incoming radiation. So imagine with 10 to 15% of radiation is reflected in green, red and blue is absorbed by the photosynthetic pigments like chlorophyll, and what is not bit absorbed, less absorbed, leading to 10 to 15% reflection is the green wavelength. But when it comes to infrared, beyond what our eyes can look at, the reflectance of the vegetation is of the order of 50 to 60%. So amount of information with 50 to 60% reflectance is much more than what you look at with your eye. And that is why now that infrared has no color, because your eyes cannot look into infrared. So what we do when we display it on the screen, the infrared image, we assign red color, and red color we assign green band of the display, and such and so forth. So it becomes what is called a false color composite. So these are the crop fields, and here you see the lines are there. This is actually an orchard. And then there are roads, there are different kind of fields are there. This is some kind of again a road. This may be a Kacha road. Then there are this is some kind of settlement area, and then there is a water body. So this is how the satellite data, if you want to look at in false color, it has much more information. Similarly, this you are very much familiar with. This is what we look generally on the Google Earth. So here, this is a time of when you can look at individual fields. These are the village boundary as well as each of the farmers holding in terms of khata number or khata khatoni, we call it in North India. It is the survey number, whole land holding number, which is with the revenue department. So you can overlay in a GIS each of these fields and look at and also see how it changes over time as different images for the same area comes. So you can see a farm scale variability. It is very easy to relate with your own visual observations. But problem is when you look at a very high resolution data, you actually cover a smaller area. And one coverage versus next time coverage is having long time gap, like 15 days, 20 days, maybe 23 to 25 days. On the other hand, if you look at a coarser resolution, so you can look at whole India at one go or a larger area at one go. Many times you are not able to relate visually because your view is very smaller as compared to what satellite is looking at. So, but there is a large area coverage and nearly every day you will get the image. So if currently if we are concerned about a cyclone making a landfall over Andhra and Odisha part of, we use such kind of data because a cyclone is a much bigger entity which is having a effective radius of something like 1,000 to 2,000 kilometers. So I'm not concerned about 1 meter of resolution. I can look at using such kind of coarser resolution data. So just to give you an example that if you want to work at a country scale, you can get data according to your problem. If you want to work at a field scale, similarly, you can generate data on that scale. So I have listed few of the applications and the applications are innumerous. Actually, remote sensing applications in agriculture, we have a one full course running for the semester. And there we actually talk in detail. So every 55-minute lecture and over 6 months you can consider with some hands-on. So, but the purpose of today's lecture, I suppose, is to give you a broader idea and motivate you to also look on the options and how you can use it into your problem solving or your research. That is up to you. Just to give you an example that land use, land cover and its change over time in a particular region, in a study area. You can generate a lot of crop statistics in terms of crop area, crop production, and many a time it gives you a much better idea if you visualize those statistics instead of tables, you put them in maps. We always say a picture is equivalent to 1,000 words. So map gives you a much better clarity in terms of how those statistics are distributed across the region. Then you can actually use it to do operationally yield estimation, yield forecasting. You can do crop condition monitoring to drought assessment. Not only a particular crop, but you can also analyze the cropping system, that what is the combination of one crop versus another crop on the same, which are same area, one crop and another crop is sown, whereas in the different parcels, which are the parcels where it is not sown. Nowadays, we talk of a precision agriculture where we want to increase the resource use efficiencies of our different resources. And there also this technology has come in very handy. Then you want to do soil mapping at a very finer scale. Currently, we have a coarser scale maps available, and this technology can be used. Then any of the type of land degradation like water erosion, wind erosion, how it has changed over time. Do we have been able to reclaim, improve, or what is happening to the land desertification, whether desert is moving into newer area or whether we have been able to arrest them, such kind of thing. Many of the agrometeorological applications like agro advisories, it has a backbone of remote sensing based data. Agroclimatic planning and information, like agroclimatic planning means which crops, when to grow, where to grow, such kind of planning. Also, there is a lot of information provided by this technology. Then climate change impact studies, groundwater hydrology, you want to do a lot of water management, a lot of data, where is the drainage pattern, when is the water, how much is the storage, where is the slope, which are the areas where more erosion is happening, and you can put up some structural measures to arrest that erosion, or conserve water, where those structures to be put, all those can be used, have a basis on using this technology. Any of the extreme events of flood, cyclone, then irrigation system performance, command area management, of course, change detection with respect to all of these, many of the applications, damage assessments due to pests, diseases, and very recently, we have been using this technology and providing inputs to different planners on what is the status of residue burning happening in India, and especially paddy residue burning in the northern states of Punjab, Haryana, Uttar Pradesh. So where, when, how much is being burnt, that is being provided. So these are endless applications, and but these are few I could tell. So just to give you an example, that in Nikra, this is one village, Mumtajpur, where we wanted to study that we wanted to introduce a lot of climate resilient technologies. And one of the basic information is needed, that in this village, when we started out, what is the baseline data, which crops are sown, how much is the sown, which field it is sown. So you can derive such kind of crop maps. Or from a village to a district, that you use multispectral data to classify where your wheat is there, where mustard is there, where gram is there, and then you, if suppose I'm interested only in wheat crop, where all wheat is there, how much, once I have, this is in geographical information system, I can calculate the areas. And here the satellite data is also showing a vegetation index which is responsive to the greenness of the vegetation or of the crop. So more green means better is the health. So this is a index of crop vigor or crop health. So wheat, of course, here is a bit poorer as compared to wheat growing in this region or this region. So this is regularly being used to do a district scale to a country scale monitoring of the crop condition and crop health. I'll give you an example. Many times we are interested to know, we talk of there is a cropping system, it is rice wheat, it is cotton wheat, it is maize wheat, it is a triple crop system. But what is the statistics that after, suppose this is one district, this is Alwar district of Rajasthan. So we have been able to classify the crops in Kharif as well as in Rabi. So it shows that wherever red color is there, this is all the forested area. Whereas green area is all where bajra is sown in Kharif and fallow in Rabi. Whereas yellow color is the one where it is fallow in Kharif and mustard is sown in Rabi. And there is a fallow wheat, there is a fallow vegetables, and there is non-agricultural area also. So, and how much is that quantified area in a particular district? So now your planning would be not only based on these statistics, but it will be also targeted spatially. That in these are the regions which are low lying, having a deeper soil, that if there is a fallow mustard, this is the area which has a potential to introduce some kharif crop in this region. Or this is, I'm just telling one example, it could be many other, but this is once objective information generated, and this could be generated every year to see whether there is a stabilized cropping system or it is changing. I have examples, but I have no time to talk of. Or you can talk of regional scale dynamics. This is the Meerut, Muzaffarnagar and Saharanpur districts of Uttar Pradesh, neighboring Delhi. And how much is the changes which happened over time? You can use satellite data to derive that between 1998 to 2008, something like around 10 years. What is the change in double crop area which has reduced in a particular district like in Meerut West, 7%, whereas in Muzaffarnagar there has been 0.82% or no change. Or in Saharanpur, the decrease has been mostly around 10% of agricultural double crop area has reduced, and where it has gone majorly, it has gone majorly into seasonal fallow. And then you can generate and know that where are the seasonal fallows. So now you can plan out accordingly that now what to do with seasonal fallows? Why the seasonal fallows have increased? Double crop area has gone there. It is a problem of salinity, is not availability of water, or there is some other constraint related to availability of finances, availability of seed. And then which are the crops to be introduced in those seasonal fallow regions? So this is just an example to give you that these kind of changes. Another, in the same village which I had shown, what we had seen, that we had under climate resilient agriculture, we had introduced different kind of conservation technologies in for wheat after rice. So conventional timely, conventional late, zero till with mulch, or raised bed. And what we did generally, this is at a field scale observations, that in those villages, all what we did that in a particular year, this was 15-16, it means December of 15 up to January of 16, there was a period when suddenly there was an increase in temperature. So the dotted line is the average of maximum temperature, and suddenly you see from 20 it has gone up to even 25, and this sustained for quite a bit of time, for something like 3 to 4 weeks. Both maximum temperature was much higher, minimum temperature was also higher, leading to a lot of speculation that in this region this high temperature may damage the wheat crop. So what we did, we monitored the vigor of those all fields. So this is average profile, how the crop grows. This NDVI you can think of equivalent to the greenness of the crop. And you see that from 12th November, as the crop start greening more and more leaves are coming, this greenness index is increasing. But you see, for all this conventional, then zero till and conventional timely and conventional late, when this heat wave came, they started going down. Especially you see conventional late was much more affected. Whereas zero till with mulch and raised bed, they continue to maintain their trajectory of increasing the greenness. So it means even against this extreme temperature, the zero till with mulch or raised bed, which is having a much better water absorption and water applications, they were able to sustain these extreme temperatures, which suddenly happened for approximately 2 to 3 weeks. So providing another evidence that these conservation technologies are also helpful for the crops to maintain. Of course, if you see their greenness is less than the normal crop, but it is able to surpass them after this event, when it is under zero till with mulch or raised bed, because these crops initially they have a shock and their growth is a bit retarded as compared to conventional, but under such extreme conditions. So these are such kind of evidences generating in support of whatever research we are doing, that yes, and this is not for one field, this is the average of a lot of fields happening in that village. So it has much more, we have much more confidence in such kind of research. Then, as I told you, we have a coarse resolution data, and every day we can manage and monitor the region. Like this is whole of Haryana, part of Punjab, at a very coarse resolution. And you can see between December, January, February, as the crops start growing, it becomes from brown to green, and up to mid-March, whole area is green, and then again, the greenness as the crop mature, it goes back to brownish. So we call it green and brown wave. Now, how it is useful? This is basically when I look at one point, like the image I have seen, this whole image of the greenness index, which is called NDVI, is available to me from the satellite data as a product. So if you put this into one over other in time and click it at one point, you will get this kind of greenness. This is during Kharif and this is during Rabi. Of course, there are always problems with remote sensing satellite data, that whenever there is a persistent cloud, then you would be missing those points, or there would be noise in the data. So we have to do some kind of filtering to remove those noise. So here it shows that this magenta color is the filtered one where these noises have been removed. So those are some techniques, and free softwares are available to handle and do this kind of filtering. Even it is available in R if you are doing R programming. And what to do? Now, you have, once this is there for every point, like just to give you an example, this is from Bihar. So from UP, we have come to Bihar. And this is a NDVI satellite, NDVI image derived from satellite, where the red color shows a high greenness, and as you go to the bluish, it is showing a lower greenness. Now you see, once I have those green profile, I can see that this type of area here is actually a double cropped area, because there is a Kharif and there is a Rabi. Whereas this is the one where there is only Kharif and then there is a Rabi fallow. This is the area which is having Kharif to Rabi fallow, because this is only a snapshot of one point of time. But when we bore into throughout the time period, when we look into the time domain, this side x-axis is the time starting from June to March or May of next year. And this is the area which is showing that it is Kharif fallow followed by Rabi zone. And here, if you see, this is again a Kharif fallow, but here dip is much larger. It is actually the area which is closer to the river, where actually flooding happens in Kharif, and then followed by there is a Rabi crop is only sown. So even that kind of analysis you can do for your research. And we did it, that once you have this kind of greenness plots, you can actually derive when is the start of the season, when is the mid of the season, when is the end of the season, what is the duration of the season, and you can actually integrate the area under this curve to know how much is the total amount of biomass the crop might have produced. And imagine this you can do for every point of the image. It could be covering thousands of square kilometers, which is not manually possible in any way. So this we used, that we found that start of the season, like in a normal year versus a drought year, it shows that the start of the season was much delayed in a drought year. Like 2002 was a bigger drought, and the mean start of the season for whole of this state, you can actually find this is only at one particular point you click, you get this. So these are the years when it has been delayed much later, like 2002, whereas these are the years when it has happened much earlier. And similarly, when it is delay in the season, the length of the season, which approximately is of the order of 110 to 115 days for all these areas, in a drought year, it has reduced to something like 78 days. So such kind of information at a regional scale could be derived. Now, what to use it for? To use it for that, we wanted to see, everyone knows that rainfall causes decrease in production of the crop. But we said that there are two ways in which this rainfall is impacting. One is it is causing water stress, which reduces the photosynthesis, and that is why the flowering and the production, the economic yield of the crop reduces. But there is another important thing. Actually, the rainfall stress also reduces the length of the season. So crop is getting less time to produce. And approximately, we said that if during the Kharif season, there is a 100 millimeter deficiency in rainfall, it means around 10 centimeter, then around 7 days is the decrease in the length of the season. And this decrease in length of season also translates into decrease in the production. So if you see the rainfall versus length of the season for whole of the agricultural area of Rajasthan, there is a very good relation between two. Whenever there is a rainfall deficiency, you see 2002, there is a length of the season has decreased. So such kind of analysis could be done, which is very difficult to get collected from the ground or by doing survey or measurements. Similarly, this we took it that government has, one of our colleagues have done this work, Dr. Sahu, that where they say that we have to bring in green revolution to the Eastern India. And we use satellite data to work for the states of Bihar, Jharkhand, West Bengal, and Odisha to find out which are the areas which remained Rabi fallow. That is mostly because of inadequacy or non-availability of water. So whatever this map you are seeing, these green areas are all those areas which normally remains Rabi fallow. There is a Kharif crop, but Rabi they don't grow, and it is a very sizable area. So quantifying where it is Then what we did took the soil map from NBSS LUP, putting up the rainfall climatology and the soil properties. We could compute that generally during Rabi season, what is the residual soil moisture remains in these areas where there is Rabi fallow, and if residual, with the amount of residual moisture, what could be the crops, like gram crop could be grown in which all these areas where its crop water requirement could be fulfilled. So a scientific basis of land use, agricultural land use planning. So this input goes to the different stakeholders. A very requirement of every administrator, whether he is at a district scale, at a state scale, or at a national scale, they want to know that what is the objective assessment of how much production is going to happen. So one is actual what happened, or sometimes they also want a forecast or a prediction sometime below, at least a month or so below. So there are different technologies available using this data coming from satellite to develop simple either regression models, because like a biometric model, this is a satellite image. Again, all red color is here is the wheat crop. And these are our ground locations where we actually measured what is the grain yield it was there. We had located those fields in the image, and we had measured, doing a kind of a survey, coordinating with the farmers when they are harvesting. We actually took a 5 by 5 meter crop cutting experiments. And only for some 20 to 25 locations we had selected, measured the yield, and developed the relation between measured yield and what was the greenness derived from satellite. And you can derive a very good simple statistical model, and that statistical model you can apply to all other fields where you have not taken. So extending and upscaling your model is easier in this case. And you can we derived for 5 villages, we wanted to know for each of the fields what is the crop yield. So this was one of the method. But if you are not satisfied with that, you want to work with a district scale, then also, as I told you, that we took multi-temporal data sets. You get a crop growth profile, you can generate the amplitude or integral, or even at what rate the crop has greened or it has matured. Put it in again a regression type of analysis to develop a model. And just to give you an example, this is for wheat in Dehradun district. We are very scattered fields are there in Dehradun Valley. So the blue is the observed yield, and the model which we developed using satellite derived amplitude, it means what was the maximum height. So amplitude refers to this height at each of the pixels. So we developed that regression model, and it worked very well. And then that model was used to forecast also for the other years also. And then for 1 year, this is the old study which was published also. And then later on, what was coming from the ground is the green color. So a model with a good adjusted R square with a p-value of 0.002 and a standard error of 123 kg per hectare. So this is in a very simplistic way you can generate these models, because all historical data is freely available in a standardized format. But anyway, you have to analyze and generate the information which you want to do. And similarly, this we took it to a larger scale for doing whole for Haryana, Punjab, and UP. And the model here, we wanted to do that. We divided the whole study area into 3 agroclimatic. There is some kind of yeah, thank you. Sorry for some disturbance was there. So a zone wise, like this you can handle and find out which are the agroclimatic regions or agroclimatic zones which are from NBSS LUP. And because in all those 1 color zones, they have similar crop type, land use, soil type, soil property, and climate. So the climate here is different, for these is different. And then for these districts together, you can make actually one model which lie in one agroclimatic zone. And this we actually used it many a times. So these are the simple regression models between vegetation index derived amplitude versus the yield historical, and those models were actually used to predict 2010-11 yield with an error of something like around 10%. We could do it. So this is one example to do at a coarser scale, but we can bring it to much finer scale at a field scale. And where the important thing is that you can derive not only image, from image you can derive some of the biophysical parameters like leaf area index, what is the chlorophyll content of each of the field of the crop which is grown. So, and this we had validated in the ground, and then combine it with some of your simulation models, and actually you can generate for each of the field as more and more amount of information getting from satellite is getting synthesized or assimilated into a crop simulation model, a better yield map you could produce. The important thing is that for each of these fields, we don't know when is the date of sowing, farmer has put how much amount of fertilizer, how much irrigation he has done, which variety has grown. So those all things were unknown to us. But what is known that in season we have observation from satellite that what is the leaf area index of the crop. So by using that information, we could steer the model to go on a correct simulation, that instead of whatever you are simulating, actually this is the observation. So take it there. So getting a range from something like 2.5 kg per hectare to something 6.5 kg per hectare yield values, and they were validated on the ground also. So how, as more and more information getting assimilated into the model coming from satellite data, the errors started reducing, which were as high as 20%. To something that reduced to 7% in both yield and above ground biomass. And then what is happening, you all know that currently government is running Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana. Under that, two kind of schemes are there. One is weather-based scheme for plantation crops or horticultural crops. Another is for all food grain crops. We have yield index insurance scheme. And basically, this is based on what is called a historical burn analysis. It means that the change in yield happening in your insurance unit, it is related to one of the peril. That peril could be anything. So whenever this change in yield becomes negative, that is the trigger point for that particular peril. That is, the value goes to that level, then your trigger should set in and your crop insurance scheme should start a payout. So what we had shown that instead of using a simple weather index insurance scheme, if you are using only a weather-based index, your R-squares for this type of historical burn analysis equation you see is 44%, 0.44. But if you use a satellite-derived vegetation health index instead of weather-based index, your R-square is much, much better. So here your trigger is this and it goes down here. So this is what we had shown that if you want to use satellite data alone, you can make up a whole scheme, or you can combine weather and satellite data to make your weather insurance scheme much objective as compared to what it is currently being implemented, because currently it is a crop cutting experiments are to be done extensively, and you know currently the insurance unit is Gram Panchayat, GP scale. Practically doing so many crop cutting experiment objectively is a mammoth and timely. Doing it in time is a very big laborious job. And planning for those crop cutting experiment itself is becoming a big headache for the government, because by the time you go, either the crop has not matured or the farmer has already harvested. So we said do away with that kind of thing. Use a satellite and weather-based index insurance, and if you use this is called vegetation health index derived from satellite, it relates much better with the change in yield which is happening in the ground. And so your R-square for yield loss and payout is much higher if you are based on a satellite-based index. Your false triggers also reduce, and your basis risk also reduce for something like around 40% to 20 to 15%. So using a technology to propose that where our scheme should be improved on, so that our yield loss should be related better as well as to the payout. Because why the scheme, farmers have no confidence in the scheme, because many times loss happens and payout does not happen, and many times payout, which may be meager, may not be sufficient, happen, or sometimes there is no loss and payout do happen because the scheme is not really based on many of the objective assessment of yield losses. So I know the examples when if in a Gram Panchayat, a farmer knows, this is an example from Gujarat, it happened, that if a farmer knows, and in that village they know that this particular farm is in crop, has been selected for a cropping experiment, what they will say to the owner that you don't water your crop, let it wilt and get damaged. We will pay you for compensation, because based on his yield loss, all the farms which are insured in that Gram Panchayat would be getting a payout. So there are such kind of things happening. So we need a objective assessment of yield losses if we want to make success of our insurance scheme. So this is one example. I have 2 slides taken from one of my PhD students' thesis. And there is not only that, you have to develop a scheme. Even in current scheme, the issue is you estimate the yield loss. And where a satellite data is actually, it captures all the fields. And using some kind of modeling now we have available with us, you can convert into, as I told you, some biophysical parameters, combine them with our crop models, and actually generate a empirical model from this crop model. You know, IRA has developed a crop simulation called InfoCrop to generate what is called a yield loss map. So you can assume 3.2 million pixels in a district implemented, and we were knowing already this was a post facto analysis that 2009-10 was a bad year, 12-13 was a good year, was a normal year, and 13-14 was a good year, where the Department of Economics and Statistics reported the district level yields were this. So we implemented this whole scheme on that. This is the Ganganagar district and the wheat areas, and this is just you see in the inset each of the fields are seen. So where you are seeing red, these are actually, there is a 10 to 20% or 20% more loss as compared to a normal year, whereas in a good year you see more green and blues are there instead of, which is 10 to 20% gain or that. So what I'm saying that this is one methodology where you can objectively generate, spatially map also up to individual field scale that how much is the yield, and they correlate very well with the ground observations. So then another important thing is that what a day is becoming that in whole scheme of disaster management, one of the important requirement is that for every disaster we should have a vulnerability analysis. Vulnerability means particular sector whose vulnerability you want to assess. Like here we want to assess the vulnerability of agriculture sector or our agricultural areas to a particular peril like drought or flood or cyclone. So in the country, we have vulnerability maps for flood, we have for earthquake, we have for landslides, we have for cyclones, but we don't have for drought yet. Because drought is a much more complicated system. But this vulnerability assessment, of course, once our socioeconomic friends do, they do it at a community scale, at a village scale, by doing a questionnaire-based analysis of data. I don't say that is all fine. But only thing is, if you want to do it as a much larger scale, then there are these technologies can be used also. So your questionnaire-based vulnerability assessment could be used to validate what you are doing using these technologies. So here what we did, that we took a long-term, this is a published literary paper also in a particular journal. So we took a long-term rainfall data to generate a rainfall anomaly. So this rainfall anomaly index is called standardized precipitation index. So nowadays, gridded weather data is available. a long term, this particular course is on time series of data analysis. So 1951 to 2009, for each of these grids, you can generate this index. Sensitivity of the crop for the Rajasthan, we took the greenness coming from satellite data, which was also of a period from 1982 to 2009. Actually, before 1982, it is difficult to get satellite data. There were very few before 1982 in public domain that data is available, but still it is sufficiently long, something like more than 20 years data. Then taking water holding capacity of the soils from our National Bureau of Soil Survey, what is the land use land cover, which is again derived from satellite images. Then in percent irrigation available in each of the 10 by 10 kilometer grid. This is very important information. The information is again generated from satellites. Of course, we are not the one who generated. FAO, following a standard methodology, has generated for the whole world. So you see the top districts which are neighboring to the Punjab are like Ganganagar and Hanumangarh are having very high amount of red color, means high amount of irrigation. Here irrigation is higher, and all the desertic area is having no irrigation or very less irrigation. So we followed a methodology where exposure is combined with sensitivity. Sensitivity was in terms of exposure, in terms of what is the deviation or anomaly in precipitation during the Kharif season over the years. Sensitivity, it means how the crop's greenness got impacted by this anomaly, as well as what is the water holding capacity of the soils, because our idea was the soils which are having higher water holding capacity can sustain the deficit in rainfall for a longer time, and so can produce better crops than over shallow soils which is having low water holding capacity. So it gives potential impact. And then adaptive capacity is in terms of irrigated area. If you have a higher amount of irrigation available, so you could compensate for this exposure of anomaly in rainfall to generate a vulnerability using a GIS-based multi-criteria evaluation, which is a standard methodology. We could generate not only the vulnerability of all the agricultural area at a very high resolution of something like 10 by 10 kilometer for the Rajasthan state, where the vulnerability is low, moderate to low in these areas. And you see, if you see a whole Kharif season, the extreme vulnerability is only in few areas. Whereas during mid of the season, during our late part of the season, the vulnerability is much higher in some of the areas. So, you know, our CREDA has generated what is called district level contingency plans. So district level drought or climate contingency plans relate to that if monsoon is delayed by 4 weeks or it is delayed by 6 weeks, what to do. So such kind of vulnerability we could do first time in India to generate a drought vulnerability map of agricultural area for a state. And we propose this, that this should be taken, same methodology could be applied to whole India to generate even a sub-district scale planning. And now the question is how you know that whatever vulnerability you have assessed, it is good or bad, because we have not done, this is a large area, doing a ground-based questionnaire-based survey is really a problem. But what we did, this was wholly environmental and physical-based indices, and we related it to some of the other indicators of vulnerability like food grain productivity. So our vulnerability rating showed a significant negative correlation with food grain productivity. It means wherever the vulnerability was higher, food grain productivity was lower. And not only that, we compared it with the, at district scale, with the Human Development Index, which is a pure social index in terms of education of the people, in terms of income of the people, in terms of it combines the health information. And you see vulnerability significantly related negatively with that also. So it shows that whatever we have done, it has some value. So coming from physical data and relating it to socioeconomic data is one example. And this was for drought. Similarly, when NICRA project was started early in 2011 and 12, one of the issue was that we should do a district scale vulnerability assessment to climate change. So again, different factors of exposure like rate of change in Tmax, Tmin during Kharif and Rabi, intensity of high rainfall events, low rainfall events, All because these data nowadays are available in gridded and they can be handled spatially in a GIS. And putting in many sensitivity factors like what is the net zone area of a district to its geographical area, what is the productivity of food grain, what is the organic carbon content of the soil, what is the soil water holding capacity, what is the average land holding per farmer, human population density, and using AHP or analytical hierarchical process finding whether that particular parameter to vulnerability is related negatively or positively. And then what is their weight? So within exposure, how each one contribute, within sensitivity, how, and adaptive capacity related to how much irrigation is there, how much you have a livestock there, what is the cropping intensity, what is human development index, what is the electrification or paved road approach, what is the fertilizer use. So however, it mostly adaptive capacity relates to either alternative sources of income or it relates to the use of technology. And finally, their weightage is combined to give a agriculture, composite agriculture vulnerability. And this we did it for the Indo-Gangetic Plain. So which are all the areas where vulnerability is high and low. Of course, vulnerability is again a relative indicator. So if you are comparing only among Bihar, the situation would be different because, but what we were interested to know that which are the districts which have a very high exposure. So these are the districts which have very high exposure and low adaptive capacity. So these are the ones which should be targeted. And just to give you an example from this data at district scale, we could find out that productivity landholding size was having this kind of relation, a very good R-square of 0.6 significant relation between productivity in Indo-Gangetic Plain versus landholding size. So more fragmentation, we are going to have a lower productivity. Then we have contributed to the drought policy in this country, how to monitor and how to declare drought in this country. That has been a very, very big thing which has been continuing, lingering for long. What happens that whenever during monsoon season, especially in our rain-fed regions, and we have large rain-fed regions where the crop production sowing is dependent on the arrival of monsoon. So if the monsoon arrives late or within the season, there are break in monsoons. So every politician in a district sit on the district collector's head or the bureaucrat to declare it drought affected. Because the important thing is that once you declare an area drought affected, then that district can ask for the money to mitigate the drought impacts. And that money they can ask from the state disaster response fund or from the central national disaster response fund. So, and you know, the money flows has pilferages also. So bureaucrats were always having a problem that there was no standard guidelines that how to monitor and declare drought. So first time in 2009, we proposed the first drought manual for drought management, which after 2014 and 15 continues to be a drought on a PIL filed in the Supreme Court of India. We had improved on this drought manual and where we had put up a lot amount of remote sensing based indices for monitoring and declaring drought in India. So this is available on Ministries of Agriculture and Farmer website. If anybody is interested, they can download this manual and read it. But now what I want to emphasize that we bring in a lot of science so that that subjectivity of declaring and monitoring drought goes away. And from 2016 onwards, all drought monitoring activity and declaration in this country is happening as per the protocol which we have proposed in this particular drought manual. So states are something like even 10,000 crore rupees is getting distributed if state follows those laws, those protocols, and prove it using those scientific indicators that yes, there is a drought and drought is of severe category. Then as I told you that we ourselves have a satellite ground station and we actually monitor whole India crop situation on a weekly interval time. So this is our web portal, creams.ira.res.in. And where what we do that we generate historical time series of data from an American NASA satellite called Aqua and Terra, and it has a sensor called MODIS. So you have a historical data and then you have a in-season data. So you can generate the anomaly in greenness, in land surface temperature, in evapotranspiration, those kind of indicators, and generate those indices and combine them to generate a weather health index. And this you can visualize as map. This is just an example to give you the whole countries, and this is at a 250-meter resolution for whole India. A crop greenness at a 1 kilometer crop evapotranspiration. What is the crop temperature? So here are the scales. So during whether it is end of the season, beginning of the season, you can actually see and look at the areas that these area greenness, evapotranspiration, as well as soil crop temperature is showing stress, severe stress. So that was in 2018 in Maharashtra Rabi season. Whereas the other areas, greenness is showing good. It's a normal to favorable. It is also showing a favorable, and this is the temperature wise, it is showing exceptionally good. So these are the areas which are the crop condition is going great. So this I can give you a practical demo on our website. And as I told you, using open source technologies, we have put in a GeoServer. So all those maps you can actually visualize in a GIS, and you can zoom in, put a background of street maps also, and look at the values. So if you are interested in your neighborhood, you can actually use this to visualize what is the crop condition as we have been seeing through satellites. So this is just an example of all the same things. I'll go ahead because there is a lot more to cover. And but our interest is that all this near real-time information which we are generating for India, this should be put in a system on improving the agro-advisory system of Ministry of Earth Sciences, which has been happening at district and sub-district scale through the Ministry of Environment and Forest and Niti Aayog monitored project. And we are already in talk and working with India Meteorological Department to use these indices of evapotranspiration and soil moisture into the agro-advisory system to make agro-advisory more contextual, more real. Then you know that issue of air pollution and crop residue burning and the health issues in the northern states is becoming a prominent, taking headlines across India. So using the satellite data which we receive in India at our IRI ground station, we actually for the Commission for Air Quality Management for Delhi and NCR region, the CPCB, the Ministry of Agriculture, the 6 state governments, we actually monitor in real time. So whatever you are seeing, these white colors, these are actually in the Punjab. This is the residue burning happening. And this is the smoke plumes which are detected by the satellite. But satellite not only detect the image in terms of smoke plumes, they actually detect where is the active fire. So these are the points, because satellite can detect and measure the temperature. So if temperature rises above a critical threshold as compared to its surrounding, you can actually say that, yeah, this is the point where active fire is happening. So you can actually count in a GIS for every district, every administrative boundary, every day from multiple satellites, and actually give an idea of how much is the amount of number of events are being captured. So this is one in terms of events which are being captured, but we can use these are at a coarser resolution, at a resolution of something like 370 or 375 meter. But you can actually use a 20-meter data set to see which are the fields which have been burned. So you can actually calculate the area. Like this is a particular field where smoke is already been getting a smoke plume from this field, which is blackish in color. So blackish to darkish grayish colors are the fields which have been burnt. And this is pre-burning when the crop is there. So all rice fields are appearing red because it is a false color composite. And this is a settlement, a village. There is a road, and you see a lot of fields getting burnt out. So you can estimate that area also. So not only burning events. So where all those burning events happen throughout the season, this is just an example from 17. This is what is in 18. So you can see which are the areas where no burning happens because there is no paddy actually, or there is other crop. Like here, this is the Bathinda belt where there is more cotton than the paddy. And the more reddish color shows what is the fire intensity. So if fire is more intense detected by satellite, it means more amount of residue has been burnt. So there may be lower number of events, but if the fire intensity is higher, it means more residue has been burnt. And you can actually see from satellite images the pollutant plumes coming with wind from Punjab to Delhi and covering all of Indo-Gangetic Range. And then you can actually derive which are the areas where rice was sown, and red is where it has been burnt. So monitoring every day, comparing it with historical events, finding out the areas like Punjab government, there is a central sector scheme for in situ management of paddy residue, and government gave 2,400 crore rupees in subsidy to buy implements in 2018. So government wanted to know that which are the villages we should focus, provide more implements. So we did an analysis because we had the rice area for whole of the Punjab and also where all the burning happened. So we overlaid the village boundary maps and found out that these are the villages where 95% of the area was burnt. So each district, how many are rice cultivating districts, how many are rice cultivating villages, out of them how many villages burn, how many villages there where there is no burning at all, or they burn only 5% of their rice area, and which are the villages which burn more than 95% of the area. Like in Bathinda, there were 40 villages where nearly every field was burnt in their village. So the government wanted that they want to give subsidy on equipment, so where they should target. So such kind of information we could provide using our analysis. And this is how much like paddy area coming from satellite, paddy burnt area, what is the percentage, how much is the rice was produced in terms of 1,000 tons, and how much it led to the production of straw, and how much straw was burnt. And not only that, we developed models using, because satellite also detects the intensity of fire power. We detected that how much amount of pollutants were emitted from these burning. So this goes to the Central Pollution Control Board, and all these burning events are again available on ICAR Creo geoportal as well as on CREAM geoportal are every day from 2017 onwards for whole of India. So that is also one example of the applications. Another is that during first lockdown of COVID-19, it happened on 23rd of March. And that was the season when harvesting was to happen. Wheat harvest season was coming closer in Haryana, Punjab, Northern India. And Government of India Central Ministry wanted to know that do lockdown is going to impact or is impacting the harvesting. But we showed from objective analysis of multiple date satellite data that up to 20, how much area and which area got harvested by which date. So we found that nearly the harvesting actually progressed normally even under lockdown condition, and there was no need for any other issue. And it was because actually government has provided the facilities that for agricultural operations were allowed, and the lockdown really didn't impact the harvesting of the crop. So there were statistics were generated and all, but it clearly shows that these were the areas which were harvested up to 4th of April. So it is irrespective of the crop, whatever Rabi crop was there. It could be mustard or there could be other vegetables. And majority was harvested between 4th of April to 24th of April. And there are certain pockets which were harvested in Haryana between 24th of April to 29th of April. And in Punjab, there was by end of April, by 7th of May, only these were the areas remaining which were not harvested. Then another area where our colleagues and we are working is related to plant phenomics, that is to help our breeders select the varieties. So earlier, what we were doing, our breeders do, they sow the lines in the fields and see their performance. But using remote sensing system, actually you can quantify the phenotypes and regularly. So it also becomes objective. So we have India's largest plant phenotyping facility, which is called Nanaji Deshmukh Plant Phenomics Center, where the different lines are grown in these pots. These pots are having all RFID codes, and they move on these trailers and they go through these chambers, and these chambers have different camera sensing imaging elements. They actually image each of the plant, it comes out. And then if you are trying to screen varieties for drought tolerance, then you have a station which measures how much is the weight of this whole pot, and then there is a station which puts up the water into this. So measured water also, that how much, which plant to be given how much water, that you can actually automatize in the system. So, and then these keep on every 10 days, 15 days, that keep on going, imaging, and then these are the different in these chambers. These are different thermal imaging, chlorophyll fluorescence, near infrared and RGB imaging, NIR shoot imaging. Then so many images were collected by the time we had put this line. And then you can actually measure that, like this is a LOC 1 variety versus HD2733 versus DGW366 versus Khurchia 65. So you have a control versus no nitrogen. So this is a control where optimum nitrogen versus no nitrogen. So you can see that LOC 1 was impacted due to nitrogen less as compared to this particular variety G366, which is impacted much greater. So its leaf blades and leaf area is much lower as compared to control. So those can be quantified, and you can actually have an interaction of drought and nitrogen stress together to see which variety works under both. And this is under controlled experimentation, and then similar work you can do actually in field using cameras put on a drone. So we have drones with cameras, and actually you plan an experiment, you grow those varieties with N120 and N0 and drought and no drought. It means irrigation and no irrigation, and then map using image them using these. So these are the fields. These are provided different drought treatments. These are the control fields, and there the same varieties were given the nitrogen stress. So we calculated different plant phenomics parameter like, and it shows that the varieties which are grown in these fields, it shows much better performance under drought as well as under nitrogen stress. So this is just an example to help our breeders in phenotyping and selecting those varieties, which could be then bred to generate our drought tolerant, temperature tolerant, nitrogen tolerant varieties. So this is again example from there. And of course you can do a lot of soil remote sensing also, because soil mapping is an important factor. So you want to know where are acidic soils, salt affected soils. You do a lot of ground sampling, analyze and put them in a map form in a GIS. So GIS is where to visualize, handle and analyze the data. Wasteland Atlas ICR is generated using these technologies. Soil fertility mapping you want to do and look at where which nutrient is lower and higher. Such kind of maps are also being generated. Or even if you want to like severe damage of grape fields, you can actually, these are all grape fields, and again red color is the crop. So this is a smaller area in Maharashtra, Nasik. So this is the grape field, and then after the damage you see there is no redness here. These plus points which you are seeing. So there is a damage. You can actually tell the computer to find out such all fields where it was reddish or green earlier, and then there is no greenness and after. So pre and post event. So you can actually calculate how much is the area which got damaged due to a particular peril like rainfall. Then I just have added these slides because this course is on time series data analysis. This will give you an idea that like IMD nowadays is providing gridded weather data of a long time series, 1951 to 2014. This is when we analyzed, but now it is available up to as high as 2018 or 19. So 51 to 2018, every day rainfall for every grid. So grid earlier was 1 by 1, 1 degree by 1 degree, it means 100 by 100 kilometer. It has been reduced to 25 by 25 kilometer. So a huge amount of data is there, which IMD has put in nearly free. They charge only 8,000 rupees. Similarly for temperatures. And using, this is a gridded data you can actually handle in a GIS. And then you can apply all your statistical technique, like what is happening to the extreme temperature. You can use a statistical test like man-candle Z-test to know what is the value of the Z-test, and all the grids where this trend using this non-parametric test gives you a significant value with P less than 0.1 are only shown in color. Rest have P greater than 0.1, and so you have a lower confidence. So what it shows that these are the areas in different months where there is a significant trend over a period of 51 to 2015 in terms of extreme warm days. So it is on extreme warm days. And you can see that nearly in 42% of the whole India, this is there, it was found to be statistically significant, this increase. And this is one example where it is not temporal, but it is spatio-temporal analysis. It means because in GIS, you have a space dimension also. So you can increase your analysis that what is happening in time, but also what is happening in space. So like here, this is one parameter which is called land area ratio. So land area ratio means how much land area increased as compared to its baseline. So if land area ratio becomes 2, it means as compared to baseline, the area has doubled. If the land area ratio is 4, that it means that as compared to baseline, your land area has become 4 times. So what we did, we took up this maximum temperature data. Using 95th percentile, we computed what is the extreme warm days over each of those grids of India at a 100 by 100 kilometer. And then we saw that in a year, how many days, which were the grids which were having 30 or less days with extreme warm temperatures, which were the one which were between 30 and 60, which were having extreme temperatures in a year in 80 days, and which were having more than 100 days. So you see up to 80s and all, there is no trend, and how they have spread over the area. So a land area ratio remains 1, means it was more or less constant. Rarely it has reached 2, like extreme, the days with 60 days, 30 to 60 days, with extreme temperatures happening. But after mid 80s, you see there was significant increase, a statistical increase in the trend in the spread of the area. So it is increase in trend in time in the spread of the area of extreme temperatures. And you see the extreme temperatures with 100 and more days in a year are increasing at a highest rate as compared to 30 days or 60 days or 80 days. So what we say is that extreme of extremes in India are spreading much faster. So this was produced in a journal. So such kind of analysis you can actually do in a GIS. There is no satellite data. It is all gridded weather data. Or using same gridded data, we used a joint probability analysis by Coppola, where we related the extreme temperatures frequency with that of crop yield, and we generated a joint probability distribution bivariate Coppola to show that if there is a 20% increase in the extreme warm days over the croplands, then there is a 11% probability that there would be a yield loss of more than 5%. But if this extreme warm days increases to 60%, then the probability of yield loss more than 5% from 11% become 43%. And this is for whole Rabi cereals across India. Whereas if you see wheat, this increase in extreme warm days from 20% to 60% may entail a yield loss more than 5%, the probability increase from 19 to 60%. This was again a published paper. Then, as I told you earlier, that we took the satellite data for whole of the Indo-Gangetic plains, Haryana, Punjab, and Uttar Pradesh, used every 10-day data at a 4-kilometer resolution between 82 to 2004, 10-day interval data to derive the crop growth profiles on each of the pixels. And wherever you are finding colors, these are the pixels which are having dominant wheat crop over this period. And then we use them to derive phenology, as I had shown you, validated with some of the ground information using growing degree day concept. I don't want to go into detail. But what we found that when we analyze for all these areas, wherever wheat is grown, how it relates to the extreme warm temperature or maximum temperature. So it shows because we were having phenology information, so we could derive all those areas where in each of the year crop was early sown, timely sown, and late sown. So early sown, you see whether it is early sown, late sown, or timely sown crop, all are negatively related to the extreme warm temperature. So this side is the slope coefficient of the simple linear regression, and this is, and the more delayed you are, the more is the negative slope coefficient. So this is our science. Our understanding, our plant physiology also says that. So from 82 to 87, 87 to 92, this was continuing. So this negative coefficient become more negative in all the three categories. But what happened next is from 92 onwards, actually this start decreasing. So you see these coefficients are decreasing. So this, you can say, combined over all the wheat growing region of Punjab, Haryana, and Uttar Pradesh together. And this discrete happened for early season, as well as for mid-season, and as well as for late season. So it shows clearly that from 90s to something like 2007, whatever newer varieties, technological improvements, irrigation, and other management, they had tried to some, or the adjustment of sowing has to some extent able to mitigate this negative impact of maximum temperature. So this is a story which we found from data. So these are the evidence up to 2007. But post 2007, though timely sown or so early sown, the trend continues. Whereas for timely sown and late sown, again, the slope becoming more and more negative, again increasing this red, showing that whatever we have gained over the period of 92 to 2007, we are losing it again. So now again, the impacts of extreme temperature, which happened in between 2017 to 14, they are impacting much more. It may be that now extremes are becoming more severe. So this is still a matter of debate, and we are trying to generate evidence that what is happening. And now we are putting and extending it to 14 to 19 also. So that analysis is still underway. But what I want to say is that such kind of a broader picture and evidence you can generate from analysis of such kind of data, where every 4-kilometer data every 10 days over a period of 1982 to 2014 for whole of this region, of Indo-Gangetic plain was analyzed. So, and as I told you, you can do this analysis in Google Earth Engine. All this data is available and you can find this output, finally take it. You don't need computation facilities. You don't need any kind of storage. Everything Google gives you free, including the satellite data. And just to give an example, within ICR, we have a knowledge portal, which is called Krishi. If you are not available, please do visit. And one of the portal, it has 6 repositories. One of the repositories is a geospatial or geoportal, which has a repository of maps, whichever spatial data we are generating in ICR, that is to be put into that. So this whole geoportal is running from ICR data center located in ISRI. And I am the lead in developing that geoportal using all open source technologies. As I told you, there is a web server which we have put in the background. There is a SQL database, MySQL. This is again free. This talks with open layers, which provides you the front end, which can be with which the user interacts. And this is currently running. You can actually go and look at various layers which are available. Many of our crop monitoring, biomass, paddy burning, and all those layers are available on this portal. So my take-home points, coming to an end, I have taken a lot of time, is that for agriculture and natural resources management in agriculture, we need to invest in building observation data, analytical tools, and supporting hardware, what to generate evidence, so that your all planning, your all implementation is based on objective evidence-based data. And one of this could be done through Earth observation data, because agricultural all operations happen on the surface of Earth, which could be monitored regularly at a scale which you want to do, whether at a field scale to a country scale you can do, and it is becoming more or less free. And many geospatial technologies are becoming advanced as well as open. And my request is that we need to build capacity of young graduates. It is not that only engineers, physicists have to build their skills in this area, but all sector of our graduates, undergraduates, they have to build in basically making use of this Earth observation data into their own real world applications in agriculture. Thank you.